What's going on, everyone? Super excited to get to celebrate Easter week with you, or Holy Week, or Passion Week, whatever you want to call it, right? The last week of the life of Jesus, where we build up towards not just Good Friday and the crucifixion, but actually towards Easter and the resurrection. We're going to be here every day. There will be a new video every day, a new Devo that we drop to walk through the events of Jesus leading up to those last few days, to the climax, right? So today we get to start with a day that throughout church history has been called Palm Sunday. It's kind of like, if you want to think of it this way, right? If Easter Sunday is the Rose Bowl, then Palm Sunday is the Rose Bowl parade. Or like if Easter Sunday is like the Thanksgiving meal, then Palm Sunday is the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade, right? It's like the celebration that happens before the actual thing. And that's really what all of Easter week is. It's this build towards the climactic event in the death and the resurrection of Jesus. But today we start with an event known as the triumphal entry. That's where Palm Sunday comes from. It's this monumental event that happens a week before the resurrection, where Jesus walks into Jerusalem. Like, he's been doing ministry all over these different places and doing all these different things, but there's a big meal, the Passover is getting ready to start. So Jesus comes into Jerusalem in a triumphal entry sort of way, which is not a concept Jesus made up, right? So kings would enter into a town, and it was called a triumphal entry, and they'd come in on a big horse, and there'd be a parade of people in front of them, and people would be in the streets, and they'd be cheering cries of victory, so excited that their king was returning into town. And when Jesus walks into Jerusalem, something very similar takes place. Right, the people are shouting Hosanna, and they're taking their jackets off and their shirts off, and they're throwing them down in front of him to honor the coming king, and they're praising him, and they're so excited, right? That's where Palm Sunday comes from, is the palm branches that were laid down to clear a red carpet out for Jesus. And so in so many ways it mimics what they would have done for the coming king, the arrival of the king of the nation. The difference is, though, most kings would come in with, like a parade in front of them and riding on a giant white horse, right? Like when you think of a kingly entry, that's kind of what you think of. But Jesus doesn't come in that way. Jesus tells his disciples, go and find me this donkey that's never been ridden. Go find a donkey that nobody's ever ridden on. Not really the most kingly entry. And actually in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 21, verse 4, it says this. It says that he did that. That took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. Jesus did that because while he's a king, he's not a king like other kings. He's coming in different. He's coming in humble, mounted on a donkey. He's telling everybody, guys, my kingdom, it's not going to be like other kingdoms. It's not going to be like the kingdom that you expect it to be, that I'm different. And therefore, if you follow me, you also should be different. If your king is humble, you also should be humble. Right? When we follow Jesus, it's like, picture this. So when it snows, which hopefully we're done with for the year by now, but when it snows, if you walk through, the first person's kind of trudging the path, right? They're putting in the snow, the footprints, but everybody behind them wants to walk. Like, you're trying your best to match your foot to their foot so that you can, your shoes don't get all wet and nasty, right? You want to walk in the same footsteps as the person in front of you. And in the same way, if we're going to claim to follow Jesus, if we're going to claim Jesus is our king, we're called to walk in his footsteps. And so if our king comes in humble, mounted on a donkey, we're called to come in humble. And so much of what the triumphal entry is about, like, despite its name, it sounds like this huge, victorious, incredible thing. So much of what it's about is it's actually calling us to humility. And for a lot of us, we've got talents and we've got treasures and we've got money and we've got all of these different resources. And it's so tempting a lot of times to use that for ourselves and to glorify ourselves and to elevate ourselves. But Jesus, this word humble, it can mean like gentle. And really it just means that Jesus was submitted to God's will. That he was there not to make Jesus' name great, but to make God's name great. He's going, God, I want to do whatever it is that you're calling me to do. And so I'm going to submit myself to you no matter what. And listen, Jesus is the God-man. So like if there was ever anybody who could make their own name great, who could live to make themselves famous, it was Jesus. But even he says, man, I'm going to live to make the Father's name great, not my own name great. And so if Jesus is walking that way, like how much more should we give of our time, of our talent, of our treasure to make God's name great, to make Jesus' name great, instead of using it for ourselves? If our King is humble, how much more are we called to be humble and walk in humility? And that's what Palm Sunday and the triumphal entry is all about. And that's what God's calling you to today.